Hello and welcome to Freedom from Fear, a German New Medicine podcast. I'm your host, Ashlee Newberry.
And I'm your other host, Abigail Puccioni. Please be aware that nothing discussed here on this podcast should be taken as medical advice.
Consult your trusted professionals and your own inner knowing before making any health decisions.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Freedom from Fear. We're really excited to bring you our first special guest in today's interview. And yeah, Ashlee, do you want to introduce Vanessa?
Yeah, so this is Vanessa. She is a native Californian. She moved to Texas, where I live too. We haven't met in person yet, but someday soon. She's an avid researcher and conspiracy theory unraveler. She loves learning, and she is working on solving mysteries every day and really enjoys that. So we're super excited to have you on, Vanessa, and hear your resolution stories.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here too. And I think this podcast is so awesome and totally needed. We need way more consumable, approachable German New Medicine content out for people to know what's going on and be able to heal themselves without being scared.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So yeah, it was a really, really appealing thing for me to find. And at the time, I also was in like the peak of a psoriasis like breakout that I had been experiencing for the last 3 years or 2 or 3 years since 2018. And so
Sure.
I've had the opportunity to, look at stuff about skin issues. And I was just like, oh, wow, this is crazy, because I had tried so many different things. I did regular Western medicine, pharmaceutical, steroid, topicals. I did extreme diet changes. I did, no gluten, no dairy. I did like the carnivore diet for a few months. I did all kinds, stop smoking, stop drinking, make sure I get 8 hours of sleep every day, doing yoga like 4 times a week, and
just all the things.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. It's not like a thing that I'm doing, or that I'm like, ingesting.
Well, not consciously anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So super interesting to discover that. And then as soon as I learned about it, I immediately was like, I need to find somebody who knows about this stuff. Like, I mean, the websites were amazing, but I was like, I need to talk to somebody. Like, I was like, I wonder if there are any doctor, or I don't even know what they would be called. Like, I wonder if anybody is an expert in this or like studies this. I was like, how do I find these people? Like, I was like so excited, and then I was like so lost, instantly. I was like, oh my God, like, what do I even do with this information? Like, who do I learn this stuff from? And then I think I ended up I went to look for German New Medicine on Twitter, because that's where I always search for everything first, because Twitter's crazy and it's like the Wild West. It's like, if you want to find something weird, go find it on Twitter for sure.
That's so funny.
That's my armchair researcher advice. Response. Yeah. It's really true though. It's crazy. Yeah. And then I think I found Melissa's account through there. And then I was really excited at the time, because she was also in California. And I was just like, oh my God, like, someone knows, like, it's a woman, she's kind of my age. Like, this is all just so exciting. So I immediately reached out to her through her website and was like, I need to work with you, like teach me your knowledge. So I ended up reaching out to her and doing a couple.
Dr. Melissa Sell. For those who aren't familiar, look her up. She has great content.
Yeah, she's absolutely amazing. Yeah, she's on Instagram, she's on Twitter. She and her husband both, Steve, are incredible, very knowledgeable people in GNM, but also just like great people in general. So I worked with her a number of times, and then I've taken some courses through Melissa and through the ones that they teach together, the awareness school. But yeah, it was
we're all like awareness school grads here, which is really funny. We've all done that.
Yep.
Yeah, I did honestly the OG considering doing it again.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great
Did you do
resource.
Radically Resourceful?
No, I actually was working with them before all of those things.
Oh, we got
Yeah.
an OG.
I've known Melissa for like 10 years. So
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
yeah.
Love
Yeah.
that.
She used to be my chiropractor.
Oh yeah, you know what? That's right. I heard you mention that in the one of your earlier podcasts. I think you said. That's so awesome.
Yeah, she's
You
great.
found Melissa and you started working with her, and the main thing that you were dealing with at the time was psoriasis, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So it sounds like you were dealing with psoriasis, trying to navigate that when you first discovered GNM. Also.
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
And I had actually so I think 2020 was when I finally decided to try and like do something about it, because I initially started developing like the symptoms of psoriasis in 2018. And I was just kind of like ignoring it. And I was just kind of like, I don't know what this is. I was worried about it because subconsciously I am very like, not only somewhat vain, I guess, like I'm worried about like my appearance, but also I was like, I don't know what this is. And that's like freaking me out. Like, what is that? And
totally.
I was the type of person who was always like, I have cancer. Like, that's always just my first, like, that was always just like the first thing my mind would go to. It's just like a twinge in my body. I'm like, that's cancer and I'm dying. So it was just like always the most dramatic.
I feel you on that.
Oh
So now that something was like visibly wrong, I was like, I think I was just like, can't deal with that. Like, don't even know how I would go about that. And yeah, it was like this weird mix of things, because like I didn't trust Western medicine, but I also didn't know like what was going on. I was like, clearly there's something wrong, but I don't want to go to hospital because I'm scared of them. So it was just like kind of messed up situation. And then it just started getting really bad. I mean, like it started developing. It was like mild scales like on my knees at first, and then I moved to my elbows. And then in 2020 got really bad, and then like 2021 it was like peak bad. Like my entire like up to here, like my entire elbow would be covered. Like I had you know how like babies have cradle cap, like I had my entire scalp was just like thick scales. Both my knees, my feet were just blown out. Like it was
so it kind of spread, right?
Oh yeah,
like
it spread big time. Yeah. So it started on my right knee. And it actually started because of a fall, which I think is really interesting. So it's like this combination of like the injury, I think, triggered the adaptation in combination with like this psyche conflict I had like at the same time that I fell down.
Because I know you've told me the story before, and what was the situation that you were in that led to you falling and hurting your knee had a really like a lot to do with the conflict, right?
I think so. Yeah. So at the time I was living in San Francisco. I had just moved back the year before to California. And at the time my boyfriend and I had just broken up then in 2018. And that was really like traumatic and sad for me at the time, because even though I was I did initiate it, but at the same time I didn't want to break up. So it was a really sad, we had been dating for a long time. We're back together now, which is amazing. But yeah, it was really, really sad. And then during the time that we were broken up, I was basically hanging out. I had like ended up making friends and like hanging out with people that, you know, they weren't like the worst people in the world, but they were just not people who were good friends for me. And like, I wasn't being it was just like kind of a dark time. It was a little sad. There was a lot of drinking happening, you know, it was kind of like partying, like there's a lot of escapism type stuff. Like didn't want to think about what was going on in real life. And so, yeah, one night I was out drinking with these people, and like, I honestly was blacked out, but I know that I fell down because I had like a scrape on my knee and then on my jeans as well, like the next day. And I was like, oh, ow, that's embarrassing. Like, so I'm drunk. Good. So I'm sure there was like a number of little conflicts mixed in together there. Like,
well, I know that the conflict behind psoriasis is separation conflict, but there's this unique flavor of kind of push pull. Like I want it, but I don't want it. I want to separate from them, but I don't want to separate from them. So there's this, just from what you've told me about, you know, kind of hanging out with some people that like, you know, you're going through this breakup and you're craving to be with community and be with people, and you want to be close to people and do fun things with people. But then, so like it's, you don't want to separate from them, but then you also kind of do want to separate from them because you're not totally aligned with them and the choices they're making.
Yeah.
So you can see how this is like the perfect setup to have this conflict.
Yeah. So you're exactly right. I'm a very social person. I love spending time out with people, and I was feeling very lonely and sad and definitely craving, you know, human connection and attention. And I think, it was a combination. I think it was just like, it was this like perfect combination of not only do I want to be around people, but not necessarily these people, but literally physically falling and hurting myself like in that state, like not like get me off of this, and also being a germaphobe at the same time, like get me off this dirty street, like away from these dirty people, like get me out of here. And then also probably needed their help or wanted their help at the same time because I'm like with them and having fallen down. So I'm like, it's just like very mixed together. So I'm like, I want the help. I don't want the help. Like I want to hang out. I don't want to hang out. And all the while I'm like very much missing my boyfriend, and like our relationship. I'm just like really sad. And yeah, so that was, but this is all stuff that like, I didn't think about, you know. The closest connection I made, even after talking to Melissa initially, was that like, maybe I miss James, and like, that's what the connection is. You know, and so I tried to like kind of talk myself through that. And I was like, he's always with me, or like, we're always together, like separation is just like an illusion, and we're actually all just like molecules that are all touching each other. Like whatever, you know, whatever. She helped me come up with like so many like fun little ways to, you know, like tell
Alan
myself.
Watts quotes type of thing.
Exactly. Yes. We love Alan Watts. So I hadn't even because like so maybe after our first session or something, you know, I'm like, okay, it's definitely a separation conflict. Obviously, the most obvious person I feel separated from is my boyfriend. And, you know, so that all kind of seemed to help. After, one interesting thing though, is like, after I discovered GNM and after I had some initial meetings with Melissa, my scalp psoriasis subsided like significantly. Which I thought was really fascinating. And I think that was due to a combination of finding some answers that I was like really desperately looking for. And also kind of like taking it easy on the like avid research of things. Like I constantly trying to like find out answers for like, I can't think of it. I can't think of the answer. So that was really cool. And then from there, a lot of the like smaller, because the bulk of my psoriasis like started on my knees, then moved to my elbows, then my head, then kind of like splotchy places, like randomly other areas like back, stomach, legs, arms. But yeah, the random spots kind of started subsiding, and then it basically like reduced down to like just my knees and my elbows. Which is interesting. But basically, it wasn't until almost 2 years later that I made a big enough connection that I noticed like a huge reduction in the psoriasis symptoms to which like I have I don't know, maybe like, I mean, like I have like the tiniest like little remaining dry skin where it's like there aren't any scales anymore, there aren't any like huge red splotches. Like,
which for those that are just listening to the audio version, she's like holding her elbow up to the camera and I can literally not see anything. So
yeah, me neither. Thanks
it's
for that, Abigail.
thanks. Yeah. It's really crazy. And basically all that happened was like, I was just in my room, or I was in my closet in the evening, and I was like putting some clothes away, and I wasn't even specifically spending time like thinking about like trying to like solve anything. I think the thought really just kind of occurred to me. Maybe I was kind of thinking about living in San Francisco or something about like in the past or whatever. No real like intentional thought happening. And the thought just occurred to me, or I guess like the realization, it was kind of like an aha. And I was just like, oh, I'm never going to be around those people again. Like I'm never going to like have that situation again where I'm going to be like drunk in danger of falling down on the dirty streets of San Francisco, like with these people who I don't really like or care about, or who I don't think care about me. Like, and it was just the clearest thought, or the clearest, it was so weird. I don't like calling it a thought because I don't feel like I thought it. It just kind of like landed like in my head. I don't know how to explain it. But as soon as that occurred, that realization occurred, I literally felt a sensation of, I mean, like it felt almost like electricity or something, like in my knees and in my elbows. It was like this like buzzing, like this like subtle buzzing. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, oh my God, something's happening. It was so crazy. I've never experienced anything like that in my life.
wow.
And it was late. I remember because James was already like in bed asleep. And I just remember like being like so amazed, like thinking like something's happening right now, and laying down in bed and feeling the buzzing like still happening. And I was just like curled up thinking like, I was like, I think it's over. I was like, I think it's ending. I think something real is happening. And I just remember like going to sleep thinking that, like I was just so happy because I felt like, I don't know, it just felt like something very cool was happening. And then over the course of like the next few days, actually, like it started dramatically reducing. And then, you know, over the course of the next few months, it reduced like almost completely. And it is just, I still have like some like little lingering like irritation on my knees and stuff, and every once in a while it pops back up on my elbows. And I feel like I think I'm still working out a track with cigarettes and possibly also wine. I think those were like intermingled. And I know that like one of the theories is that like once you solve the like the foundational conflict, like all of them other kind of like fall away. And I think that could be true. And I also I think it's possible that I may have just kind of like mentally like gone back on my like second guessed my knowing almost, you know what I mean? Like intellectualized it to where I'm like in my I don't know, my spirit, my consciousness knew that like that's never going to happen again. But like my intellectual mind wanted to be like, well, of course that could happen again. You don't know that. Like you could end up there and like you could randomly run into them again and blah, blah, blah. And
well, and that's
my arm just tingled when I was saying that.
That is like a main criteria for resolution, is getting to a place either like practically or perceptually that same situation or you know whatever has occurred cannot happen again, because you are changed and your perspective has shifted, or because practically it just won't ever happen again. So I love that you shared that.
Or if you can laugh about it.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's super big. And one of my ways I try and fight my intellectual mind out of that is by saying, well, no, you can't, that actual thing can't ever happen to you again because we've moved forward on the timeline and literally we can't go back. That specific thing can never happen to you again. You're a different person molecularly. Nothing's the same. Everything's different. So that can literally never happen again. So.
And I love the moment that you shared that you kind of had that realization, that deep inner knowing. And I know Melissa always calls it like feeling the stone drop from your soul. It's just like this, like you just knew. You didn't have to like convince yourself and talk yourself into it. And I think that, and the fact that you were aware enough to notice like the sensations, the tingling, like you had such a deep sense of knowing that you could literally feel the program, like, you know, kind
ending.
of turning off. Yeah. Like ending in your body. But I think also just to speak about, you know, why did you experience a separation conflict in the first place? Like why was psoriasis even, or why was that conflict scenario a conflict for you in the first place? And I think something that I'm sure we'll talk about in later episodes too, like your perception, the way that you've grown up, your family, your friends, you know, if you grew up in religion, if you know, whatever society has shaped you, like, you know, that shapes the way in which you view the world around you. And that sets you up to experience certain kind of conflicts. And so, you know, it sounds like when you were in the situation of, you know, hanging out with a group of people, maybe not super aligned. And I think for that too, like they probably represented activities like, you know, heavy drinking, for example, that you were feeling really split about, you know, that push pull, like, well, I kind of want to, I want to be part of the group, but then I don't, you know, and with the, you know, the boyfriend situation, like, well, you know, do I want to be with him? Do I not? You know, like, who am I going to be with? Like it's this whole phenomenon, which it's not surprising to me you experienced at so many different places on your body, because it sounds like a pretty large, like overarching conflict for, you know, what your psyche was set up to experience. And, you know, do you want to speak a little bit as to, you know, I know you worked with Melissa and you were, you know, learning about the actual root cause, which I think can be so helpful for people to understand exactly why their body's adapting in that way. But also through that process, you know, what life changes were you making? You know, were you feeling less of a push-pull about, you know, the kind of people you were spending time around, the kind of person you were being, you know, the activities you were engaging in, like, you know, that sort of thing?
So yeah, I was definitely, there was definitely a lot of change happening in general. I mean, it was such a kind of like volatile time. Because it was during the pandemic, I was living in San Francisco. And so it was like stressful. I felt, you know, there was a lot of, I think, factors adding to like the separation conflict. I was in general feeling very separated from like everybody that I wanted to be not separated from. And then basically the people who were willing to hang out were people who I was like, but I guess I have to because
because they're the only
no one else will.
I gotta take what I can get.
Yeah, exactly. It was very much in a take what I can get type of space. And, you know, like, again, I'm not trying to like talk bad about them, like they're so bad or anything. It's just like, it just wasn't good for me at the time. And so, yeah, I mean, finding out the root cause was like really important. But it wasn't like that, you know, that's it. And it's not that can't happen, because I have experienced kind of that as well. And we can talk about that in a second, but, and so that, I think it was kind of challenging to feel like I was understanding part of what was going on, but to not see the results as quickly as I wanted them to. You know, like I did, I definitely saw like improvements.
And I mean, talk about, you know, during COVID with like quarantine and isolation and feeling not just physically separated from people, but I bet also, I mean, just from what you shared, like kind of intellectually separated from people, like, you know, ethically kind of separated from people. Like, I mean, that was a really isolating time for so many people. And I know I've heard personally about how many people have experienced recurring skin issues and rashes and all sorts of things since the pandemic specifically too.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's kind of interesting that psoriasis kind of, it seems to tend to stay like in this age range where it's like not super young people tend to get it and not super old people tend to get it. And I feel like it's in the period of time where we're just as adults like trying to figure out like, what do we want? Who are we? Like, what are we, you know, stressing ourselves out with like unnecessarily, as far as like putting ourselves in situations we don't actually want to be in, and or not allowing ourselves to be in situations we do want to be in.
Totally. Like a lot of that push-pull energy.
Right.
And
exactly.
for those wondering, like psoriasis is specifically one separation conflict that's in active phase, active conflict, and then one that's in healing, but at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, you know, this is just my personal feeling, but I think psoriasis specifically it seems to be more so wanting some, like getting touched, but not wanting it. Like it seems to be more so because it's so much like on the outsides of the body, as opposed to eczema, which seems to be more on like the insides. Yeah. It's like get away.
Trying to get away.
Right. Because mine were all like on my shins, on my knees, even like on the front of my shins. I almost never ever got anything like on the backs of my legs or like on the inside of my arm. It was very much like I want to like get, which made sense because while I did that, I think that was the main issue. Like I did want connection, but I didn't want those ones. And
would you say that you wanted the connection, but not in the way that you were getting it?
Yeah,
like
well, I think
in a different way.
I think who I really wanted to be close to was my boyfriend, but I think at the time, like because of the factors that like led up to our breakup and that we were broken up, all I wanted to be was close with him, like physically and romantically, and that wasn't an option at the time. And so I think I was like seeking that from other people, but I didn't actually, I didn't want, I only wanted like, I was just getting what I could, you know, where I could get it. And I was just like, oh, I wish that wasn't the case. And the whole time I was just wishing it was, you know, my boyfriend who was the one comforting me or like befriending me or like going out with me instead. And so I think that was like the big part of it, was like want the attention and connection, but you're not the people that I want it from. But I guess I'm going to have to get it from you anyway, because the person who I do want it from is not available.
Yes. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I have to say that while it was kind of like confusing and challenging to feel like I understood, but to like not see the results, like it was still worth like looking into, you know, ways that I could like talk nice to myself and like try and like resolve like other smaller or kind of like connected conflicts, or even just issues. They don't even have to necessarily be conflicts, but just things like, you know, feeling bad about how, you know, my behavior during those times, and like being friends with people who I didn't want to be friends with, or like drinking more than I wanted to be drinking, or not sleeping or whatever. And just kind of like forgiving myself for those things and being like, that's okay. And like, I think like being nicer to myself and like kind of relaxing a little more, possibly even like allowed that clarity to like come to me, as opposed to like spending so much mental energy focusing on like feeling bad and like feeling ashamed and like wishing I hadn't, you know, like done this or done that.
Which is self-devaluation, which we will be doing future episodes on.
Yeah, of course.
Lots of personal stories to share. Yeah.
So I am curious though, to wrap this story up, when did you get back together with your boyfriend, and did you notice any changes from that?
So we got back together, let's see. I think like August of 2019. So it was like a year later, for 2020. So yeah, no, like I think the symptoms themselves like got peak terrible during COVID, because I was like super, super isolated. Cause like the buildup, like when I was like hanging out, you know, I felt when I was hanging out with those people, that was in 2018. And then like, I was still kind of like hanging out with them. And then that was kind of tapering off. And then James and I got back together, and I spent less time with some of those people. And then, I mean, like, yeah, I don't think the symptoms really improved that much as far as when we got back together, just because we weren't living together at the time. It was still a bit strained. So I think it wasn't quite enough of a resolution to
Practical.
Yeah, exactly. It was just like it was like, yes, we're back together and like this is happening, but it was still like there was still like a lot of work to be done. And then
probably
basically
a lot of tracks.
Yeah, there was the many tracks. One big one was like alcohol. And so like I think like, and because I was still doing a lot of drinking, I didn't really cut back on drinking until like after the pandemic started. And I was like, I'm not into like, I'm a social drinker. So I always told myself like, oh, I don't have a problem with alcohol because I'm always drinking with people around. And so like, even though that's like not the case, you can definitely have a problem with alcohol and only drink around people. And that was the case for me. But thankfully I didn't like to drink alone. And so I just, you know, once the pandemic started, I just like hung out in my apartment by myself. And because I was also like scared of hanging out with people before at the beginning because of the germs.
But then there's also the push pull with that. Like when you were kind of cutting back on the alcohol because you're by yourself more, then you were more isolated and not hanging out with the people. So it's like, you know,
double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It got really, really bad. I was like I felt really, really alone. Because it was tough. Yeah. But even before I found GNM, I was trying to be, you know, a good citizen. I'm like, I'm not gonna like go out. I'm not gonna like spread my germs. I like followed the rules. You know, I was like, I'm in my apartment. I lived by myself. And a year later, I was not following the rules, thank God. But at the beginning, I was lightweight terrified. There were multiple times where I was like bawling, crying because like I thought I got someone sick or I thought someone got me sick. And I was like, it was just such a terrible situation. And yeah, so I think that kind of isolation really, really threw my skin conflicts into hyperdrive. But thankfully was able to, you know, find Melissa and then, you know, find some relief for that, because it was really the aha moment. And it was just so interesting that I just like, I don't know. I think almost sometimes you need to like not think so much about it. Like, don't try and like, I need to solve this. Cause I did that for a really long time. And I'm not saying it can't work or can't help, but I was literally just like cleaning my closet and the thought came to me. So I don't know what to say.
Like, how can I chill out about this? How can I feel more at peace about this? Yeah. Which is why I think zooming out to kind of see the big picture of what was going on. And, you know, that can sometimes be more helpful than like zooming in and let's find the exact conflict shock moment. And let's find all the specific tracks, you know, because people, like I'm talking about me, can become really neurotic without a process, and that's not helpful either. So, you know, do you want to share though about the warts that were all over your hands? Because that's a super cool story. I love that. Yeah, we'll do that one quick. So also while working with Melissa, I had this was like, I think I met her in 2021, so this was like a year later. I'm not like, I think I was like embarrassed basically. So I hadn't like asked questions about like, oh, like what about this conflict, or like what about these symptoms? Because I always thought like the warts on my hands were like super gross. I had like 10 warts, maybe like 5 on each hand, like on different like knuckles, my fingers. And I had previously worked in childcare for like 6 years, and that's during that time is when I developed them. And I never went to the doctor for them. I just like looked it up and I was like, oh, it's normal for like kids and childcare. You like get these micro cuts and the bacteria gets in there. Everyone has like the herpes simplex, whatever virus that like, yada, yada, whatever. We all carry it, etc. Anyway, I was basically like, well, that sucks.
whatever it is that they say that everybody has, but nobody presents. I was just like, well, that's lame. And I hate this. Now I have witch hands. And again, with like the vanity, like self-devaluation stuff where I'm like, oh, I'm hideous and like the worst. But yeah, so that was like a point of embarrassment for a long time for me. And eventually, I think it was during awareness school, I ended up asking Steve and Melissa, I was like, what should I do about this? You know, I was like, I don't know what they are. I don't know what they're from. I was like, I think I might know. I was like, because I worked with kids for a long time and like I did kind of think it was gross, like all the drool. And like, don't get me wrong, I loved the babies, but it's just like the feeling of the drool on my fingers, it was like makes me like.
Well,
like
Ashlee, do you want to mention like the type of conflict just for everyone listening and kind of like what warts are?
Yeah, so warts are also a separation conflict, but it's actually deeper in the epidermis, which is the outermost layer of our skin. So it's actually the same conflict as psoriasis, but a different flavor. It affects the same layer of skin, but it is deeper in that skin layer and usually has some type of flavor of more like the being grossed out too. With the warts.
And it's also
yucky.
like from like a repetitive, like hanging, healing, like where it's a recurring.
Yes.
Like building up, breaking down, building up,
exactly.
breaking down, building up, breaking down. Yeah. So I finally asked them, you know, like, what do you think this could be from? And Melissa was like, yeah, like, I do think it's probably, it's likely, you know, that if you thought the stuff with babies was like changing the diapers, whatever, you get a little poop in here, stuff like that. I was like, yeah, okay, that checks. She's like, but if you haven't been doing that for a long time, she's like, you must have, she's like, and they haven't fallen off, you must, it's likely you have other tracks that, you know, are like, triggering the same adaptation. So I was able to figure out that I was trying to think like, okay, what do I do so often that I think is gross? Like, there's not that many things anymore. I'm just home all day. I work from home. Like, I don't know. And I'm not that. And now that I'm familiar with GNM, I'm not like I'm not scared of like germs or bacteria. So I'm trying to think like, it used to be maybe like doorknobs or stuff like that. And I know it's not that stuff anymore. But then I realized like, okay, yeah, it is still like it's like a feeling thing. And it's my cat's food. And I give them wet food. And so when I would like open up their can of food, almost every time, not even every time, but it happened enough to where I was like bracing for it every time. Open the can and like some juice would like fly off and like get on my hands. And I'd be like, ugh, like the smell things. It's always like oozy. Like it's never like just like, it's always like viscous, you know, it's just like, so
yeah.
I realized.
Would you like wash your hands right away after it got on?
Yeah, like, well, like immediately I'd be like, oh, get it off. Like I'd be thinking like, I gotta get it off. And Steve
was
like,
every day.
Yeah, it was every day, multiple times a day, like three times a day. So yeah,
makes sense.
And yeah, and so Steve was like, yeah, it's the cat food, and I was like, okay, well, what do I do about it? Like, I gotta feed them the food, you know, I'm not gonna switch their food. They're very picky. This is finally found them the food they're gonna eat. So he said, he was like, well, one, I think it's really hilarious that your most likely stinky, slimy, viscous brain is so grossed out by a drop of cat food juice that like it has to biologically adapt to protect you from that. I was like, that is funny and interesting way to put that. And then he also said, you know, now that you've identified it, just create like a tiny ritual around it in which you know that after you open the cat food, you can just wipe your hand, like have a little towelette with you, like whatever you need to just know that like you're not soiled, nothing gross is gonna stay on you, nothing's like harming you that you need to get away from, that you'll just wipe it off, everything is fine. And that'll just be your little process for the day. And then literally like after we had that conversation, it was probably like 2 weeks and all the warts had fallen off in that time. Like, I mean,
Wow.
they just started
Wow, 2 weeks?
crumbling and falling right off. Like
Wow.
all of them from my hands. Like it was crazy. They just
Wow.
immediately started like drying up and they got like really dark and then they would just like crumble off. And I've just
And
never.
you totally resolved that perceptually because you still fed your cats the same food. So you were still like the track was there, but your relationship to it changed because when Steve told you that kind of, and you know, this
funny
is using
joke.
Humor, right? Like
Yes,
he's, you know, using humor, like, oh, my silly, slimy brain is grossed out by this slimy cat food. Like, and you're like, oh, well, yeah, that's kind of funny.
Yes, it was. And I was like, oh yeah, that is ridiculous. And that is funny. And like, it isn't hurting me. And something that's like helped me with a lot of like skin and like touching things. Cause even after getting over the germ stuff, I realized like, well, one, it has been so deeply programmed for such a long time that like, I think even knowing is like sometimes not enough to like, for your body to like not react to stuff, like intellectually knowing, I mean, sometimes, you know, you need to like have something like funny to just like be like, oh, that's ridiculous. Like that's
like, oh, my silly little brain, you know?
Oh, I remember what I was going to say. I was going to say that my body is like my skin, nothing that doesn't hurt my skin hurts my skin. That's what I've had to tell myself. Like, unless it hurts, like, unless it pains my skin, like, unless it's like an injury, like nothing can hurt my skin. Like, you know what I mean? Like the germs aren't hurting, like nothing that touches it, unless it's like causing pain, it's not hurting me. And so that's something that I've like, that's really helped me with like, because like sitting on toilet seats, because I had like a wart on my butt cheek, actually, that's actually getting ready to fall off too. I almost didn't say anything about that because I was embarrassed. And I was like, no, we're not embarrassed. It's just our bodies trying to protect us. Okay. So I had a wart on my butt cheek and it's getting ready to fall off. So hope you guys enjoy that little story at the end.
I need a progress update when it actually falls off.
Absolutely.
Just no pictures, please.
No pics.
Oh gosh, I love that. That was a great story.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy stuff. I mean, like it's blown me away. And you know, I try to like share the information with anybody who's like willing or ready to listen. Because it's a lot. But I mean, like if you're ready, it's just totally mind-blowing. I mean, it's amazing stuff.
Yeah. And it's interesting how both of your stories are about, you know, separation conflicts. And so obviously the way that you perceive the world, you're, you know, primed for experiencing separation conflicts.
Yes. I think I grew up in a very like, ooh, yucky type of like environment.
Like wash your hands right away. Don't get dirty.
Yes. Exactly. And then, that was only like solidified with like, you know, a near decade of childcare, working in childcare where it's like, germs, oh no, wash your hands, that's the most important thing. I was like re-indoctrinating myself like as an adult.
Yeah.
One recent adaptation I've noticed has been a sore throat. I've been trying to like reduce I smoke cigarettes, and so I've been trying to
just kidding.
I know, scary.
How could you?
I know. It's like a weird like point of pride almost, like in the like GNM world. I'm like, yeah, I'm the bad girl. I still do that because I know it's not gonna kill me. So yeah, even though it's like not good for me necessarily, I'm still gonna do it. Very silly. Very silly attitude. Basically, I'm just like partly addicted to cigarettes. I mean, I do enjoy smoking, but I smoke more than I would like to. So I've been trying to cut back. And I read a note. I mean, like I was already aware of this, but I read a note in the Psychic Roots of Disease. I think it was in the Psychic Roots of Disease book. That he was basically like, if you do, you know, if you try and quit, try and do it in a way that's like not upsetting to you, like try and do it in a way that's not going to cause you additional conflicts, you know, because you're like desperate to smoke, but you won't let yourself. And then you end up with some sort of like morsel conflict or something like that, which is, I think is exactly what I did. Even though I did try and do it like in a kind of like slow, easy way, I am still trying to cut back. So it's like when I have the craving, I'm trying not to immediately smoke. And so there's been an interesting phenomenon of when I finally do allow myself to, because I kind of, I did this for like January. I was like, okay, I'm only going to smoke after 5 p.m. for the first week. And after the second week, I'm only going to smoke, max 2 cigarettes after 5 p.m. And then the next week, I'm only do 1, etc. So that first week I noticed like I would have a lot of cravings during the day and I'd be like, no, it's not 5 p.m. yet. And then my 5 p.m. time would come and I'd get to smoke my cigarettes and that'd be great. And then the next morning I'd wake up and I'd have a sore throat. And I'm like, oh, it's interesting because it's been so long since I've had a sore throat. I knew right away that like, that's what it was from. And it was also such a long time since I'd tried to like cut back or quit smoking. So I was like, very clear to me, at least, that is what that connection was.
Do you want to describe like the conflict for those that aren't familiar with that adaptation?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a morsel conflict. Like you really want to consume the morsel. And I think it has to do with like the tonsils maybe, or like something in the throat that's basically like, it's building up extra tissue to help like break down the morsel and or like grab the morsel. And so, yeah, I was not allowing myself, my body was very desperate for something it thought it wanted and needed. And then
for those who don't know, a morsel can be literally anything.
Right.
Because some people get really caught up, like, what is a morsel?
Yeah, it's not just food.
Right.
Yeah. It's not just food. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like something that you desire and it can be physical or non-physical. It's like if you wanted to, and it can even be, it's weird. It's interesting. And like you said, it depends on people's perception because like, it could be something like someone says to you and one person might have like a hearing conflict over that. And another person might have, a morsel conflict over that. So it's super interesting. But yeah, mine was definitely like wanted to have it, didn't get it. And then when I did, my body was like, oh yeah, we can shut down that adaptation now. Now you have a sore throat.
And I'm guessing that like when you smoke, that part, like around the tonsil, like that part of the body would be like the smoke would like touch it, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly.
So that would make sense as to why your psyche associated, the morsel that you want to get as being with that location.
Yeah. And so a friend of mine is also doing the same thing. He vapes nicotine. And so I asked him, I was like, hey, I was wondering if you noticed while you were cutting back, like if you noticed any symptoms like in your mouth or throat or anything. And he was like, oh, that's really interesting. I actually did notice I got a cold sore like a couple of days ago.
Conflict.
And he was, because he was like, I have been trying to stop hitting my vape so much. And so I left it at home, like during work or something. And then, when he like went back and hit it, he had a cold sore like the next day. So
wow, that's really intriguing because that's like the not wanting to separate from like the vape, like touching, like where it actually would kind of like touch. Whereas yours is more the morsel conflict with like,
mine is like, I love the
hitting the throat.
That's what I like about smoking. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And his is probably like I miss the physical, like I miss knowing that it's right there, like that I'm hitting it.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And do you want to also describe like, because I think a lot of people will probably be, but like smoking, is like, I don't know, poison or, smoking causes cancer or smoking, and I think what the nuance that I'm getting from you is like, you want to break the addiction because you don't want to be addicted to something, but that it's not that smoking causes lung cancer or that smoking, is a poison, because if it were, everyone would get lung cancer, right?
Yeah,
everyone would be affected the same way. So the reason that there are differences in symptoms that people have, or perhaps no symptoms at all. Like I think like my husband's grandfather smokes a lot, like every day, and he smoked his whole life, and he's like, I don't know, 90 some years old. And like, decently healthy, and so anyway,
and if he thinks it's fine, if he thinks there's nothing wrong with it, that's why, like he knows that he's fine. Like he's not worried about it. He's like, I've been smoking my whole life. I've never had any problems with it. He's like, I don't need to worry about what they're saying about it because I know I'm fine. And I think that's huge. I'm trying to get there.
And that's where the individual perception, which German New Medicine takes into account with everything that, Western and holistic medicine really doesn't, is so interesting because it's always about your relationship to the thing than the thing itself, whether it's, food or the cigarettes or something else or relationship or just anything. It's always about your psyche's perception and relationship to the thing, whatever the thing might be, rather than the actual thing. Because as Abigail was just saying, if it were a true like toxin or poison, then everyone that's engaging in smoking would have the same response. But we've seen that that's not true. So yeah.
Right. Or at least the same, like, if someone's smoking the same amount as someone else and they like kind of weigh the same, it's like kind of the same exposure. So you would expect the same, outcome, the same result more or less. So,
yeah, exactly. I mean, and even, and I know like Instagram or social media is not a good measurement of like reality, but I'll be online and I'll see videos or images of women that are basically like the same age as me, giving kind of like a warning saying like, I look like this now because of like the sun damage and like smoking for so many years. And they'll look more aged than I do. And I'll just think like, is that because you believe so strongly that like someone was telling you your whole life, like, oh, these things are going to damage you, and you chose to still do them, but believing that they were going to damage you. Whereas like me, I've never been afraid of the sun. I've always hung out in the sun my whole life. It never made sense to me that the sun would be bad for me. Plus, I was also lucky enough to like, my dad is Egyptian, so he has a lot more melanin in his skin. So I wasn't like, I wasn't as nervous as some other people with lighter skin might be to like get sunburn. I never got sunburned. So I was like, I'm not worried about that. And then with smoking, I think I've also just been like a little bit delusional my whole life. I mean, like not in actuality. I think in actuality, I'm quite based, but compared to like, everybody else and what they think, I've always thought very differently. And I was always just like, it's not going to affect me. It's just not going to affect me like it does other people. I don't know why. Like, I just feel like I know that. And I just always, I was always just like, it's not a big deal. Like, I'm going to be fine. Like, I don't know what gave me that idea, because the world was telling me very much that it would not be fine. But I think just because I like doing what I want to do. And so I just tell myself like, whatever, like it's going to be fine. But just to speak on what you asked, like, I don't want to quit smoking because I'm afraid it's going to kill me, or when I get cancer or some disease, or it's going to affect my health in this like super terrible negative way. I want to do it for like the same reason where I cut back on alcohol. It's just because like, I don't need to drink a bottle of wine a day. I don't need to eat like 10 boxes of cereal a day. Like, could I? Sure. But like, it's going to inhibit my ability to like live well in general. Like
it's going to lower your overall, like resiliency and just your overall wellness that will then, help you move through healing phases better and help you,
and that's what I want. Yes.
Be less
I want to have more energy. I want to be more capable of like resolving conflicts when they come up. I want to be, like in a calm, like, state where if conflicts do arise, like they're not as intense, they're not, the duration isn't as long, etc. And so like, and I also just like, I like having control over like my thoughts. I like being, the one who's deciding. I don't like the idea of like this little subconscious like thing running around in my brain, one like poking me and saying like, hey, you need to go do this right now. Like, go do it. You don't have a choice. Like I want to be the one who's in charge of that. So that's my approach, because like, I'm really not, I mean, like after I met Melissa for the first time, or I think maybe even before I met her and just learned about GNM, I was like, doesn't give me cancer. I was like, jackpot. I found it. I was like, I just wanted to find something that told me smoking was fine. And I found it. And I love it.
But I think like what you were touching on, like it's about working on your relationship with the thing instead of it's not about cutting out the thing itself. It's about your, why you're using the thing to begin with. And I think this is why, if you look at, okay, well, smokers have a higher rate of lung cancer, well, why? Well, first of all, I think, those advertisements, I mean, there's a huge campaign against smoking, right?
Yeah.
And then they literally show a visual, like image or video of like, oh, this is like how it's blackening your lungs, or this is what a smoker's lungs look like, right? And as soon as you see or hear that information, it's like, that can be a definite conflict shock moment for a smoker. Like, a death threat, because, the lung adaptation that would lead to lung cancer, that's a death threat conflict, and it would be caught off guard. Oh my God, I might die from.
Oh yeah. I'm sure the first time I ever bought like a foreign pack of cigarettes that have the picture on them, I was like, oh no, why would they do that? Like, oh my God. It was, I'm sure, very shocking the first time. Like, it's still gross later, but not as shocking. But like there's just like an entire war going against like smoking and the people who are doing it. It's really sad because it's too bad that it can't be approached more like, sure, this isn't a healthy habit, but it's not going to kill you. But there are benefits to like reducing or, cutting back on. It's just like you wouldn't want to like run through a dust cloud every day on your run, like that wouldn't be the best. You wouldn't be getting the best possible fuel or air into your body, just like smoking a cigarette or like living in a very polluted place every day. So, it's not just about the material.
With like nutrition too, though, people are so quick to like blame everything on food, and they want to, make a food change or, so change the way they're eating. And they think that, oh, this is going to be, prevent me from getting all these diseases. But if they're afraid of like the gluten or dairy or, eating at McDonald's because, oh, they're trying to poison me, the world's out to get me, they're trying to poison my food, them eating that, McDonald's burger, that could be a conflict shock for them that does in fact lead to disease. So, I think it's interesting to look at, like, we're not claiming that these things aren't correlations or that they don't play a role, but we have to look at, okay, the thoughts, beliefs, the attitudes, the cultural programming around the thing, because again, some people eat this stuff, smoke cigarettes, and don't have issues. So we have to look a little deeper. And that's basically, what we're doing with, within this German New Medicine framework. Because, also with the smoking, another example, with lung adaptations is it's possible that their conflict that, preceded their smoking habit could be the reason that, they needed a coping mechanism to cope with the conflict. And so then they turned to smoking cigarettes.
Totally. Yeah, that's actually really interesting because I have, when I was 19, an ex-boyfriend of mine passed away while he was in the military. And that was like the first person I knew who died, and he died of a drug overdose, which was very tragic. But at the time I was 19, and at the time I was smoking. I started smoking when I was like 17. But I was like trying to quit. I'd quit. And, after finding out about that, I remember I went to his funeral and I couldn't even go inside because it was just so sad. And, I ended up just sitting outside, and a friend of mine came out and he was smoking a cigarette. And I was like, you know what? F this, like, give me a cigarette. And I just like started smoking. And then basically from there, like never really like there were times where like I didn't smoke as much, but I never really like decided to like intentionally like quit or cut back after that, because I was like, you know what, this might make me feel better. So it's okay. So I think that's totally like a really realistic situation for a lot of people, that it's like for coping, for sure, or for stress.
Right. Exactly. Well, I think that was a really cool story. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
I loved all your stories, actually.
Yeah, super great.
Yeah, it's so interesting to think back, and like just like be a detective on your own personal history. And like I remember when I did my first session with Melissa, and like she had this huge long questionnaire to fill out about like trying to remember like any potential conflicts that you've ever had. And it was just like, it's really crazy to realize like how much we experience every day, how we experience it, and like how those perceived experiences affect our physical health and like how we feel. It's just like super fascinating. And like I love that German New Medicine kind of offers a a fun, like introspective, like detective approach.
Yeah, totally. It's just like looking back over your whole life, seeing things through a different lens.
Mm-hmm. So great to have you, Vanessa, on our 4th episode. And looking forward to hearing more of your story later on, seeing how things are going. And thank you for everyone listening. And we hope to have you back soon.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. We appreciate you being here.
If you would like some additional support in navigating your health symptoms, we both provide coaching services from a German New Medicine perspective.
Our Instagram handles and personal websites are linked in the podcast description.